Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Talk with Kiet podcast, where we connect people, ideas, and capital to help make a difference in the world. Today, I'm on with my buddy Sean Tai. Sean is the founder and former CEO of Debt Domain. Sean and I today will talk about his entrepreneurial and career journey, as well as how to successfully bootstrap a startup. And that's quite relevant in the market we are today, because honestly, fundraising is not as easy. You got to be disciplined with your money. So, Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Kit, it's a pleasure to join you on this podcast. Looking forward to our chat.
And Sean, I'm very excited because this is not intentional, but over the last few recent conversation, I've been on with successful Asian entrepreneurs. Um, and so usually where we start with the podcast is the origin story. So I want to talk about your origin story before founding Debt Domain.
Sure. Thanks, Kit. Look, I was born and raised in Sydney to immigrant parents, Malaysian, Chinese, and also from Malta. So I think that really helps you to be an entrepreneur, having that sort of background. I had the privilege of attending a private school that had a lot of entrepreneurs in the school. So that gave me an environment to see successful examples of entrepreneurs in lots of different fields. And that enables you to be comfortable with taking a risk to step out of your traditional career. I did start, as many Asian parents would encourage you to do, become an accountant or a lawyer or a doctor. And I became a chartered accountant with a tax specialization at KPMG. Then I followed a traditional career into banking, working in banks in Australia and also in Singapore, learning about debt capital markets and loan syndication, Standard Chartered, Macquarie Bank, National Australia Bank. So I had a decade of relevant training and professional experience before I embarked on my solo entrepreneur.
No, you had a fairly successful banking career. So what triggered you to leave that behind to start a business? I think you started Debt Domain in year 2000, right?
Yeah, so the markets in Asia were still booming. I was in Singapore, high bonuses, lots of deal flow, high economic growth. And it's a big opportunity cost to leave a solid banking career. But I had the experience of high-speed internet in Singapore probably 5 years before the technology was widely deployed in Australia, or the UK. And having that experience at home, with streaming movies or doing online activities like banking or share trading. And then you go to your bank job in the big tower, and it's basically paper, fax, couriering documents. And at home, it's efficient. And the office is like your poor secretary slaving away at the fax machine for 4 hours to launch a primary deal, sending out 300 invites. So, I thought there's a solution there. And then having the, Australian training, you're really pretty good at sort of architecturing the solution.
And so you started this majority with your own money, though. Like, what was the conviction to say, "Hey, I'm going to go at this"?
Yeah, look, I'd been working for 10 years. I'd saved a fair amount in a low tax jurisdiction like Singapore. I believed in myself. I believed in the idea. And I was also asking for friends and family to come along. And I did not have experience raising money from institutional investors. It wasn't so common in those days. Angels were more common, I would say. So I followed that, and I raised money from myself, predominantly, friends and family, and one angel investor, which was an old boss that I had, a Scottish guy working at Merrill in New York, in Hong Kong. And so Debt Domain was funded with about $1 million of bootstrap capital, of which 75% came from the management team. That was it. And we started to build the software platform and hire a tech team. But then a few months after we started in 2000, the crash happened. We did plan to raise an institutional round, but that became unviable from the end of 2000.
So how do you bootstrap that in, like, starting something and then 6 months later you have the 2000 crash happen? Like, how do you survive that?
It's extremely tough. Like you stop all management salaries, and those that can't afford that have to leave. We shrunk the team from 20 people in 3 offices to 6 people in 2 offices. The software guys got paid, the developers, but the management team did not. We retain our equity, and we, scrape by. Need a supportive family environment for you to do that. which we had. But you stay focused on the customer product, the customer outcomes. And you need a strong personal resilience. You have to have conviction. You have to believe in yourself no matter what obstacles are thrown your way.
And you managed to actually get to a point where you're cash flow positive, like by 05, 06, right?
Yeah. So look, we did sign up early on back in 2001 a decent sized deal with the subsidiary of the World Bank in Washington called the IFC, which gave us revenue capital that we could then feed into product. So you get into that virtuous circle where one significant customer leads to another customer. So you sign up, National Australia Bank, ANZ, and that slowly gets rolling. But you need to remember the sales cycle here in this bank-to-bank market is extremely slow. It was like a typical 1-year sales cycle. It's slow. They have to very long vendor approvals, but we knew it's high quality revenue. There's no risk of your customer defaulting, and we knew the product was sticky because they're loading up all their investor contacts, the deal information, and once you're through the vendor approval, they're less likely to do it again for a competitor. And we just focus again on workflow, always improving the product. We iterated very quickly in those days. There was no such thing as cloud or agile sprinting. We sort of made it up as we went.
Yeah. Now, was it beneficial that, you're essentially building a solution for what you were doing for a living, right? Like you were your best customer in that sense. Like, did that help?
Yeah, no, being able to go into a bank meeting room and say, look, I was working at Standard Chartered in loan syndication. I understand, your workflow, your environment, what's important to you, what you care about, how information is compartmentalized, with investors, and you're respectful of the customer's persona. So you're not like you're an outsider trying to learn the industry and build for the industry. You understand as a subject matter expert what is required. That helps the sales process. That helps with the product design, and that is something I strongly believe in. And you see the same thing with your previous guest, Samira from White and Case. She's an SME in her space.
No, that's right. That's right. Now, before we touch on the GFC era, I want to touch on, to me, and I could be wrong, like Detoming was the one and only fintech startup that originated in Singapore that actually gone global. Like, tell us about that journey in terms of starting in Asia and how.
Yeah. Look, I happened to be in Singapore when I started, and as an Australian, Singapore and Sydney are pretty close, so you don't want to go too far from home. But when you look at the global volumes, EMEA and US are much larger than Asia in those days, and even today they're still much larger, but the discrepancy is less. So we opened a London office in the same year as we opened our Singapore office. We put senior staff in London, and I was based in Singapore, but I had a senior guy in London, a guy called Tim Skinner he came from Bankers Trust and ING in loan syndication. So again, like me, he had a loan market background, and he's credible in front of customers. And we had the same approach in both markets, but the EMEA market in those days was probably 3 times the volume in Asia. So part of our success was having both the Asian footprint and the EMEA footprint. And a lot of the clients operated in both regions. Think of an HSBC, for example. So to be able to pitch the bank both in Singapore, Hong Kong, and in London, extremely helpful for sales process and product development, because you get feedback from both regions.
Yeah. So while you did start in Singapore, you opened a London office pretty quick, right? And
Yeah. It was essential. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in a relatively small pond, and that's going to long term probably kill you.
Yeah. Okay. So 06, you guys cash flow positive. 07, things are humming along. Then 08 happens. What happened in 08 and how you managed to weather that?
Yeah, our main product in those days was the primary syndication sites, and that's the market where the bank lending really dried up, and so the volumes went down in that year probably at least 75%. So our revenue, which was from SaaS fees on the primary issuance, was hammered. But we did have some other products that were starting up. We had an embryonic agency product, We decided to really focus on agency. So it's the same deal, but after the primary syndication, there's the agency phase over the life of the syndicated loan, which is typically 5 years.
Yep.
And that provided good base revenue, and we really invested in that product from that year in perpetuity. I made it my focus. We got to know agents, and they were not marketed that much before, and they really appreciate someone paying attention to their challenges and their workflows.
So it was really pivoting, right?
Every challenge is an opportunity. So
That's right.
You realize the primary market is volatile, and say portfolio servicing is much more stable. Same customer, same asset class, just a different phase of the life cycle.
Yeah, yeah. Now at that time, you didn't end up having a new investor coming in, right?
Yeah. So in 2008, a gentleman called David Levy gave me a phone call saying that he heard a lot of good feedback from his team about Debt Domain's function, particularly for joint book running deals. And he was the founder and CEO of one of the well-known companies in the space called Syntrack, which had sold in 2004, and he was able to invest. We didn't need the money because we were already generating cash, but he wanted to invest and take a leadership role in the company, set up our New York office properly, bring some of his old team members across, and help us go fully global. So we closed that deal, and David became my co-CEO for the next 5 years. He took care of the tech team, operations, and North American business development, where I looked after the much larger business in EMEA and APAC.
Yeah, so talk to me about that co-CEO dynamic, because one of our previous guests, Kevin McDonald, ran a very successful startup called Black Mountain, right? He also had a co-CEO.
Yeah, I remember those guys.
Yeah. So talk about that co-CEO experience.
Yeah, look, with the co-CEO or co-founder, I invest in startups, and I like that dynamic where the personal attributes are complementary. So you're looking for generally opposites. So someone introvert paired with an extrovert, someone who's good with detail versus the big picture, someone who's logical, someone's good with people. You want to have different character traits, and then the combination of the two becomes very powerful. You get better decision making. That bit of tension is healthy. And also resilience. So you've obviously got the risk of one of the founders having some catastrophic thing, and having a backup person in there is also helpful as well. David is a guy with a different background to me, and we were very complimentary. We rarely argued. We got along, and we cared deeply about our team as well. We ran the business as a family. I need to make a note here. The staff attrition in Debt Domain for the time that we bootstrapped it from 2000 to 2014 was probably under 7% a year.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, we viewed everyone as family. I mean, we had very sort of loose, because it was like the headcount was between 20 and 40.
Yeah.
And so David's team was roughly 20 in North America, and my team in London and Hong Kong was roughly 20. And at that sort of level, you know them like a family. You've hired them. There's no need for people to write reports, because you kind of, in an open plan office, you can see and hear every conversation. And the staff really appreciated being empowered and trusted, and they accepted our decisions.
Now, also
the alignment is also important here, because as a bootstrap company, I mean, the management team up till exit owns 75% of the company, because we didn't do any rounds. There was just one angel investor. So until exit, we retained 75% of ownership. So there was board meetings were almost, there's not much to talk about because we know everything. And you can, there's much less admin because everyone's aligned pretty much.
No, that's right. But talk about that uncertainty though, right? Because bootstrapping on the other side, you're putting a lot of your wealth in one bet.
Yeah.
Like sleepless nights, uncertainties. Like, how do you manage that? Or is it because of the upbringing of an entrepreneurial culture?
Look, 2008 was scary. We also had litigation with a large US company, which is scary. I mean, there's definitely major bumps in the road. We were in Chapter 11 in Singapore back in 2005. Did you survive and get stronger from all these challenges? Every business will face challenges. And some of your success leads to your own challenges. when you're successful, people will see you for strategic. So you just have to focus on the problem. Don't get emotional. You to stress manage. I did a lot of running to music. You have strong self-belief, and you don't ever share your fears. You just show confidence all the time, and you get through it. But at the end of the day, you have to be logical. So my professional training was really useful. So as a chartered accountant, you can pull in your skills from that profession and get into the details and get advice and solve any problem you face. Because you have those foundational skills. And if you've got a broader set of people in your team, someone like David Levy, who's seen more experience than I have, and then we bring the two brains together. This is where COSIO is super helpful. You can solve more challenges than you can on your own.
Yeah. And how do you want to bring an outside dynamic? You became a dad 18 months after starting Debt Domain.
Yeah.
Right? And not only growing a child, but you're also growing a startup. Like, how does that dynamic work?
Oh, look, my business is older than my children.
That's right.
So I've got a context. The Debt Domain is 24 years old today, and my oldest daughter is 21. And she's also they're both born in Singapore. Look, everyone said Debt Domain was my baby. It predates my children, and I gave it way more hours than my children, because usually work is more than your parenting time. Look, I'm proud of two daughters and the startup. But to your earlier question, which I don't think I fully answered, was about risk diversification. I had all my assets in Debt Domain shares. I didn't own a house. I didn't buy a house until my second exit in my mid-40s. So I was basically renting for more than 15 years. And then your family complains, "Oh, why are you still renting?" Well, I said, "Well, I get a better return on my assets leaving it in the business. But we don't own our home." You have all these discussions with your family members. And then there's always a risk of something catastrophic, which you can't predict. So in our 14th year, and for strategic reasons as well, with the US leverage market, we decided to align and do a strategic exit to a US leverage player, which was KKR.
That was 2013, right?
Yeah, 2013. Yeah, so it was 14 years after we started.
Yeah, but you kept still a majority of your equity. You actually didn't sell, right? You kept a lot of it still.
Yeah, look, I believe we had a lot of upside in the business, and the private equity term sheet was you can sell any percentage between 50 and 0. So because they want to maximize alignment with themselves, they typically buy a controlling stake, and they want management to roll as much as possible with them. And so the minimum was 50. Most rolled 50 to maximize proceeds. I rolled 73%. And I did that because it was the amount of money would be plenty to retire on for the 27, and I didn't want to sell. Actually, wanted to sell 0. I asked them if I could sell 0. And actually not. They said no. We need to acquire the business.
But then talk about that process to sell, because that must be pretty tough as well. Like this baby you've years, right?
Because you're giving away the keys, particularly for budget. But look, the developers who owned a good chunk of the company, David Levy and his team, my wife, my other partner in London, they all wanted to sell. It's been 14 years. It's a long run. Been a lot of tough times like 2008, and the business was doing well. And we had a very prestigious buy in KKR. It's not every day you have a bootstrap exiting one round to KKR. It was a small deal by their standards, but still we were enamored to have them give us a term sheet, which was not bad. So it's a chance to do-risk. You don't always make every decision, but we did run a process. So we had bids from Carlyle, from others, and we went with KKR.
And did it pan out as you expected? Like for those that are out there that are in similar situation, would you do it again to sell to a private equity?
Look, it depends on what your goals are. My general proposition is hold on for as long as you can. If you believe in your business, you're doing well, hold on for as long as you can. Because once you transfer control, you've lost control. And you might still grow it, you might still have some fun, you might still be with your team, but there's a lot of some key decisions that you don't control anymore. And if you're used to taking all the decisions, that's a big shift.
No,
And also it depends on your age, kid. I mean, if you're young, you could start another business, you could leave. But it's not that we weren't young, but we put in already this 14 years.
Yeah.
We had strong personal connections with our clients or our friends. So we were sticky that way, which was also a reason for successful. So we never really wanted to leave the industry. And proof to that point is that I stayed in the business 6 years after that sale through 3 acquisitions.
No, that's right, because it got bundled in with IPO, and then when IHS Market acquired IPO, you were still there, right?
Yeah, well, we sold to KKR, which was the owner of IPO. Then KKR sold IPO with Debt Domain to Blackstone and Goldman Sachs, and then Blackstone and Goldman Sachs sold the combination of IPO and Debt Domain to IHS Market, and then I left sort of 8 months after that transaction.
Yeah, but what was the driver to stay that much longer when you really had your?
The personal relationships. I mean, it was the team that you'd hired. I'd hired all these graduates in 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
2000. So you spent a decade with these graduates. You had people from before that time. Your client relationships stretching back to 2000 or before, and you enjoyed your personal interactions, and you also were still learning. You were also still improving the platform, but our capacity to execute was getting, I guess, degraded because it wasn't the sole. As the business gets larger and more complicated, you're working with other teams in other businesses. Everything slows down because you have to involve more people in, anything you want to do, and that's just natural as you grow. We weren't used to it, and there were some benefits, but also some costs.
And so, was it easy now that your baby, you're outside your baby,
Yeah.
you're no longer part of a startup? Like, how's life been since the exit?
Look, I focused on a few other things that I wanted to do. So an exit is a chance to to pursue other interests. So I have an interest in personal health, and so I've been able to embark on some personal health projects. Not like the silicon billionaires that spend $2 million a year, but much smaller scale versions of that sort of thing. And also to back a whole generation of new entrepreneurs. So I've invested in 20 startups, mostly seed and Series A, B2B, SaaS, lending technology. And that was interesting because I could learn what's new in tech.
Yeah.
And I could also mentor the CEOs from my own experience, which is quite helpful. I've got close to quite a few CEOs. I did that for a while, a couple of years. But then, you could have missed the cut and thrust of being hands-on leader execution style. And so I've decided about a year ago to go back in my old space and work on something new. I still think there's opportunities to do better for clients, and just working quietly in stealth mode with a view to bring something to market next year.
So it's something that was interesting when you and I caught up in London.
Yeah.
Where the things you do and the focus is not necessarily about the money, but it's really about like problem solve. Tell
Yeah,
me
that's
more
true.
about that.
That's so true. That's so true. A lot of the founders and VCs, they focus on growth metrics, money, revenue, and I care much more about creating value for clients because that goodwill will translate to money later. And I look at competitive differentiation. So it wasn't so you don't just do something adequate. We try and do something excellent. So everything about our business was about excellence. So, we didn't put customer service in a low-cost location. We hired graduates and we put them in London and we put them in front of customers. We hired experienced, expensive people for most roles. When we were bootstrapped and we controlled our budgets, we maybe overinvested, but I'd rather have a solid foundation with strong areas.
Yeah.
And the clients really appreciate that. We sponsored things which were not necessary. But it always turned up in goodwill. It's like karma. So people, whereas the other companies would, have some robotic call center, in Philippines or whatever, we had, they could be good, by the way. We basically gave a personal touch, which I described it to the team like we do 4 seasons style service. Whatever the client wants, we do, and we don't charge them. We even removed in the schedule for contract products. In most software contracts, you've got this addendum with, say, extra services, hourly rates.
That's right.
We removed all that from the contract. We have no capacity to charge it. It's not in the contract.
Wow.
Okay. Also, the other thing with software contracts, typically for software that's pretty mission critical, is that you typically, with investments required, sign a multi-year contract. All of our contracts are annual evergreen, so we have to be on our toes to retain the business. We have to earn it every day. And at the same time, this will astound people. We never lost a client. We lost 1 or 2 in North America in 20 years, and none outside North America. 0. 100%.
That's amazing retention. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Customer, people.
Yeah. We didn't lose a client. So the foundation was really strong. The NPS scores were the highest of any product of IPO, which we're proud of. The rate of innovation did slow after we got acquired, but it's still ubiquitous today, and people still say it does what it's in, and we know how it works, and we trust it. That's what typical client would say today.
And in your view, is it easier to bootstrap today, given technology, or is it tougher?
I've seen examples of successful bootstrapping today. There's 2. There's one that in a way.
That's right.
And there's another that I know. I bootstrap is great because there's strong alignment between the founder. Small teams can work a lot faster than big teams when they're focused. Some successful examples of small teams being super successful. WhatsApp, for example. I'm a big believer in a power of a few individuals.
Yeah, and I think that's important advice, right? Because right now the reality for startup is fundraising is actually quite challenging.
Yeah,
and I would imagine that will continue to be the case over the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, look, it will be challenging, but I think it's a blessing because when you raise a lot of money, you typically have a high burn rate, which means that if things go not to plan, you've dug yourself a deep hole.
Yeah.
But if the burn rate is much less, then you can actually plug any revenue, any gaps probably more easily. There's ways you can do it. The amount you need to raise it a lot less to plug any gaps, less mouths to feed, and so on. It's like the analogy I like to think about is the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs had big burn rates. Think of the mass of a dinosaur, right?
Yeah.
When the food becomes scarce because of the smoky environment, the small animals survive because they don't have a high burn rate.
That's right. It's all about the burn rate.
Exactly. So and that's what happened in 2001. 2001, we had a lot of competitors that had bigger teams.
Yeah.
Because we were small and bootstrapped, we survived and they died because they had dozens of more people than what we did.
Yeah. And navigate away from startup bootstrap. You started debt domain 24 years ago. The loan market has evolved for the last 23, 24 years in theory. But what is your view? Like, what's your view in the ecosystem?
Look, it's a really slow-moving market, Kiet. So the rate of change of the market is probably the slowest of any major asset class. You need to remember how large this asset class is. How much primary issuance a year is there fixed income or equity capital markets compared to syndicated loans, which is 6,000 billion every year. There's no of the three. The loans is the largest in terms of primary issuance by far, but it's still evidenced by a 200-page facility agreement that is not homogenous. Is highly negotiated, and that is the major industry challenge. The asset class is attractive because it's flexible to the borrower. They can, agree at any way with their group of bankers.
Yeah.
But that makes it very hard operationally. So you have large headcount working the back rooms of banks trying to figure out what to do when something happens. And they read a document for a few hours and they try and understand it. Systems are not ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's also the opportunity. There are some big initiatives underway to improve that. We'll see if they work. There's been many attempts before, but this time the motivations and capital being committed is more than I've ever seen in 24 years.
Yeah. But you do see there's more opportunities for startups to actually continue to solve that workflow.
Yeah, well, I chaired I moderated a panel in Singapore 3 weeks ago where it talked about the fintech platforms for loans globally. I've never seen more innovation in the last 3 years than the previous 3 decades. There are more than a dozen new startups tackling different parts of the chain. Obviously, there'll be consolidation, but there's been real effort and lots of good execution to come up with more modern solutions using new technology that wasn't available 15, 20 years ago. So
yeah, I mean, Namu 21 is one example, right?
Yeah, exactly. So digitization championed by NAMU 21, very exciting what she's done so far.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for being on today. Really appreciate all your insight.
It's great for the opportunity.
As part of tradition, where we close this is really an ask from you to the audience.
Yeah.
So, who you want to connect with and how can the audience help you?
Oh, I feel I'm pretty well connected. Look, if I have any, I would say that if there are people, particularly in the US market or in Europe or Asia, that wants to reach out to me, I think got some relevant conversations to have, then ping me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have a chat.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sean, for being on. And thank you to the audience for your continued support. Have a great one.
Yeah, cheers.
Bye-bye.